At the airport, she laughed at me. Right there, in front of everyone. "Sweetheart, the military discount isn't for costumes," she said, smirking as if I were some kid playing dress-up. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. My name is Lieutenant Commander Riley Sanders, 28, Navy officer. I've spent over a decade in uniform, leading teams, managing operations, and earning respect in situations where being underestimated wasn't an option. And yet, here I was, at a busy airport, uniform pressed, shoes polished, carrying the weight of duty and deployment orders, being mocked by a civilian airline agent named Melissa Carter, 32. The line was long, the morning hectic, people sighing and shifting impatiently behind me. I could feel their eyes, some curious, some amused, but I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I simply stepped aside, letting her words hit and pass, my Navy training holding me steady. And then, just as I was about to hand over my ID, the moment changed. The cockpit door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, authoritative, deliberate. Every passenger instinctively straightened as if sensing he commanded the space. His eyes scanned the line and landed on me. I noticed the way his gaze shifted to my name tag, and for the first time, I saw his expression change. It froze. The casual, mocking energy in the air shifted instantly to tension. Suddenly, the smirk on Melissa's face faltered, replaced by uncertainty, as if she'd glimpsed a consequence she hadn't imagined. He turned to her and asked sharply, "Where did you get that clearance?" And just like that, the entire situation pivoted. The laughter faded. People stopped whispering. I felt my heart rate spike, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Who was this man, and why did my name tag seem to carry so much weight? Everything I thought I understood about control, authority, and respect in public spaces was about to be tested. The ordinary routine of a crowded airport line had been thrown into chaos, and the answer to this question would change the way everyone in that terminal saw me. I adjusted my posture, my mind racing. I knew that in a matter of moments, I would either reclaim my authority or watch it be defined by someone else's misunderstanding. And then, I realized, this was far bigger than a simple airport encounter. I could still hear her laughter echoing in my ears as I stepped aside, keeping my calm. "Sweetheart? Costume? Really?" The airline agent, Melissa Carter, didn't realize she was about to underestimate a Navy officer with a decade of experience. I had seen this before in civilian life. People assuming uniforms meant nothing beyond appearance. But I wasn't about to let her disrespect define me. I was Riley Sanders, 28, Lieutenant Commander in the Navy. I had deployed on missions that demanded split-second decision-making, coordinated with officers across the globe, and led personnel who counted on me with their lives. And here I was, being laughed at for... what? Wearing my uniform? The line moved slowly, passengers sighing behind me. Some were whispering, stealing glances, curious. Some probably assumed I was just a young woman playing at authority. I didn't react. I didn't even glance at Melissa. I simply stood, composed, letting the tension build in a quiet, controlled way, the same way I'd trained my teams in the Navy during high-pressure moments. As I approached the counter, she leaned slightly closer and repeated her jab, smirk still in place. "The military discount isn't for costumes, sweetheart." I could feel every eye in the terminal on me. A part of me wanted to snap back, to assert my rank and make her regret the comment. But I knew better. Calmness in the face of provocation is more powerful than anger. I stepped to the side, waiting. That's when it happened. The cockpit door opened. At first, I didn't know who the figure emerging was, but the moment he walked toward us, the energy in the terminal shifted. Everyone noticed. Soldiers straightened. Airline staff paused mid-task, and then his gaze locked on me. He didn't just look at my uniform, he looked at my name tag. And suddenly, the atmosphere changed. What had been a routine, if awkward interaction, transformed into something heavier, something charged. Melissa faltered, her smirk disappearing. The man turned to her, voice low but commanding. Where did you get that clearance? And in that moment, I realized I had no idea what was about to happen next, but it was going to redefine how everyone here, including me, understood authority. The terminal felt smaller all of a sudden, like the air itself had thickened. Every whisper, every stifled gasp seemed amplified. The man who had stepped out of the cockpit was Special Agent Thomas Kane, 45, a federal air marshal with decades of experience. His presence commanded attention without a word. The moment his eyes landed on my name tag, the entire dynamic shifted. Melissa, the airline agent, seemed to shrink under his gaze. Her confidence, built over years of dealing with everyday passengers, evaporated. I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she fumbled with the boarding passes. Around us, passengers shifted uneasily, some whispering, some craning their necks to see what was happening. Agent Kane didn't raise his voice, but his tone carried authority. Where did you get that clearance? His eyes bore into Melissa, making it clear she had crossed a line she didn't understand existed. I kept my calm, letting the moment unfold. Years in the Navy had taught me to stay composed, even when others doubted my competence or my authority. I knew who I was, what I represented, and that my uniform wasn't just a piece of fabric. It was a symbol of discipline, training, and responsibility. Kane's gaze softened slightly, just enough for me to realize he had assessed my credentials instantly and recognized the gravity of my role. He nodded to me subtly, an acknowledgement of respect and understanding. No words were necessary. I didn't need to explain myself. My name tag and uniform spoke volumes. Melissa finally found her voice, but it was weaker now, hesitant. I just assumed. Kane cut her off with a single, pointed look. It was clear she had misjudged not just me, but the authority behind my presence. As Kane directed her to follow protocol properly, the tension began to shift. I felt a rush of vindication, but it was tempered by awareness. This wasn't just about ego or respect. The interaction had underscored a larger truth. In public spaces, authority can be misread, underestimated, or challenged in ways that carry consequences. As I moved toward the boarding gate, Kane leaned closer, quiet enough for only me to hear. Not everyone can handle this calmly. You did. My pulse quickened. I realized that while the immediate embarrassment had been addressed, what came next, how I would navigate this unusual situation, was entirely in my hands. And just as I reached the jet bridge, another sudden movement caught my eye. Someone had entered the cockpit. The implications were clear, but the full story was still about to unfold. The jet bridge felt narrower than usual, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows that mirrored the tension in my chest. I knew this was no ordinary airport encounter. As I stepped closer to the plane, I could feel every eye in the terminal still lingering. Airline staff whispered behind counters, passengers glanced over their shoulders, and the hum of boarding announcements seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Special Agent Kane walked beside me, his presence a silent shield of authority. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, his gaze swept over me, then back to the airline agent. Melissa Carter fidgeted, her earlier smirk replaced by a look of nervous disbelief. This was the moment she realized she had misjudged more than just a young officer in uniform. She had misjudged the weight of my clearance and the world behind my name tag. Kane finally spoke, low and deliberate. Lieutenant Commander Sanders, your credentials and clearance are valid. She had no idea what she was dealing with. His words carried a subtle warning to everyone in earshot. Respect wasn't just earned in the military, it could be demanded by circumstance. I nodded, acknowledging the truth. This was bigger than embarrassment or vindication. The key lesson was unmistakable. In a civilian environment, appearances could deceive, and ignorance could have consequences far beyond a sarcastic comment. My years of training had prepared me to lead in crisis, but this was a different kind of challenge. Maintaining authority, composure, and respect in a world that didn't always understand the structures I represented. As we reached the cockpit, Kane opened the door, gesturing for me to step inside. My uniform, my name tag, my reputation, it all mattered now. The plane's interior felt smaller, more focused, a microcosm of the authority and responsibility I carried. Melissa lingered outside, unsure of how to act, while passengers watched silently. Kane leaned slightly closer and murmured, "Most people wouldn't have handled that without snapping. You did it with calm authority. Remember that." I felt a rush of adrenaline, pride, and relief, but also awareness. This wasn't just a lesson for the airline agent. It was a reminder of the responsibility my uniform carried, even outside the Navy. And then, the cockpit door closed behind me, leaving the terminal in stunned silence. Everyone knew I had been right all along, but no one yet knew the full extent of what my clearance and presence implied. The story was far from over. What came next would demand more than composure. It would require action, judgment, and the understanding that authority sometimes announces itself quietly but unmistakably. The cockpit door closed behind me, and for the first time, I could exhale. The tension in the terminal had dissipated, replaced by quiet realization. Logically, the situation was now clear. Special Agent Kane had intervened to correct a serious misunderstanding. The airline agent's mockery had been entirely misplaced. My uniform, my name tag, and my official clearance weren't props. They were proof of authority and responsibility that carried weight beyond appearances. In that moment, everyone who had watched understood that misjudging someone based on age or gender had real consequences. Emotionally, relief and validation surged through me. The humiliation I'd felt seconds before was replaced by pride. Not arrogance, but the quiet satisfaction of composure meeting recognition. I realized that calmness and patience had turned what could have been a public embarrassment into a demonstration of integrity and command. For once, my years of service were recognized outside the Navy, in a civilian setting that often misunderstands authority. The consequences of that moment rippled further than I expected. Airline staff now knew the weight of proper protocol and respect for military personnel. Melissa Carter would never underestimate someone in uniform again, and other passengers had witnessed firsthand the importance of authority and composure. My professional reputation had quietly expanded. Passengers and staff alike now saw me as someone whose presence demanded attention, even without a word spoken. Finally, I took my seat on the plane, uniform pristine, name tag visible, boarding pass in hand. Kane gave a subtle nod from the cockpit, a silent acknowledgement of the role I played not just in the Navy, but in the larger framework of security and responsibility. I smiled internally, understanding that authority isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet certainty, a presence felt without needing to shout or demand. As the engine started and the plane pushed back from the gate, I reflected, this wasn't just about an airline encounter or a mocking comment. It was a lesson in patience, respect, and the real-world weight of responsibility. My uniform represented service, leadership, and the ability to navigate tense situations with composure. For the first time that morning, I felt fully in control, not just of the boarding line or the terminal, but of how I carried myself in every space. Authority, I realized, isn't about proving yourself. It's about being ready when recognition finally comes. And today, it had.